Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. A lot of these younger veterans do not actually understand. And it's because there's some major confusions going on there because maybe people don't clearly understand the words that I used. And they don't understand the world has fundamentally changed and the United States is a different world in the post 9/11 world from what it was when I was a young man. And we'll come to that in a second. But first of all, let me give you guys the actual definition of a mercenary. According to the Wikipedia page, a mercenary is a Jason Bloho. I grew up a hunter. I grew up a competitive shooter and a hunter. I hunted since I was 6 years old. I shot since I was 6 years old. I started doing long distance rifle shooting in competition when I was 12 years old. So we'll call it a hunter. I was a hunter of exotic game. And a pretty good chunk of the game that I hunted was a very dangerous type of game that did some sort of masonry or bricklaying because they stacked bricks of some type up.
What's that based on?
Alright, so let's go back and look at timelines a little bit. A lot of you guys grew up in a completely different world politically and even from a war perspective. A lot of you guys reached adulthood around the time of 9/11 or shortly thereafter, or in that range. I'm turning 40 years old this year. I was 18 at the end of 1994. I turned 18 in 1994. President Clinton became president in 93. So my young adulthood was during the Clinton years, during the Clinton administration. So yes, I became a man at the start of the Clinton presidency. I was scouted out for certain types of work before I even finished high school. Again, due to my family, my upbringing, connections certain members of my families might have had along with my shooting skills. Again, I was shooting very successfully at 1,000 yards as a teenager, well before I was an adult, in actual competitions. So it isn't far-fetched that I may have been offered certain types of employment at that point. And people keep saying things like,
there's no such thing.
But people keep saying only mercenaries, only people who become mercenaries are people who were in the military, who were combat veterans. Look at what was going on in the mid and late 90s in the United States, nearby countries, and all around the world. What military veterans? What military veterans did we have in the 90s?
Fellow citizens, last night I ordered U.S. military forces to Panama. At this moment, U.S. forces, including forces deployed from the United States last night, are engaged in action in Panama.
Yesterday, after conferring with my senior national security advisors, I have therefore directed General Norman Schwarzkopf, in conjunction with coalition forces, to use all forces available, including ground forces, to eject the Iraqi army from Kuwait.
A very, very short war with very little combat experience. There were no veterans, logistically speaking. Where were people going to get veterans to do the massive amount of exotic game hunting?
I'm Connie Chung, reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York. Good day. President Bush is about to address the nation about his decision to send thousands of U.S. troops to the African nation of Somalia.
Gang wars had spilled into the streets. We had an enormous amount of death and violence in this country due to the gang wars and the drugs and the drug cartels and everything going on that people who are living in this era don't understand because they didn't see what was going on. A lot of this stuff reflected in all these gangster movies. That's what reflects what was going on in this country during that time period inside of our cities. There was a drug war happening in the streets. There was a drug war happening all the way from our border with Mexico all the way down into Venezuela and Colombia. There was an enormous amount of mercenaries being hired to do various work. And there weren't enough veterans, not even close to enough veterans.
You can't say that.
So yes, people with any of the right backgrounds who could be trained, who had aptitudes, were recruited to do this sort of work who had no military experience.
Look at his little roundy, baldy, monkey head.
With no military experience, young men who just had certain aptitudes and skill sets or the right connections that got trained up to do this sort of work. And it wasn't full-time jobs. These were off and on things, a weekend here, a week there, a couple weeks here, a couple weeks there. In and out of the country. And men weren't even always paid cash, because the truth was, this was a very competitive market, a competitive environment. It was very dangerous. And there were other things worth more than money for people who wanted to stay in this line of work. Training and hardware. Those things were worth their weight in gold. There were times, because of the lack of getting enough training and needing access to newer tactics, newer skills, things that were being learned and pushed out there, that a lot of guys would do jobs and work for free and it be paid by having access to certain training facilities from time to time. Meaning they would go do a job and maybe be allowed to be trained at a certain facility for 2 weeks. And equipment that was very difficult to get, that they would sometimes do jobs in exchange for hardware to improve their operational capacity. Nobody has deeper pockets than Uncle Sam. And we got worked hard, and sometimes we got broken. And since none of these men were members of the military, because everything was done clandestinely, libre factum. And yeah, a lot of these men broke. I watched a lot of guys that I knew, a lot of guys that I had become friends with, either die in the field, kill themselves either at their own hand or supposed suicides, or just be disposed of and disappear. Treatment. But I'm one of the lucky ones and I survived. So, those of you who don't believe any of this, that's okay. I really don't give a fuck. I'm still telling my story. This is for all these guys who are veterans, who are standing there still screaming about your valor, stolen valor. You know what? Fuck you, kid. You can go fuck yourself. I don't really care what you think. But I will tell you this. If you decide that you're going to come confront me physically about it, you better not be a fucking pog. You better be a stone cold killer. If you come at me aggressively, voice raised, negative body language as someone who I know is a trained killer, because I don't flinch anymore. I haven't flinched in 20 years. So if you come at me, I want you to know, son, it's not going to be me who goes in the ground. I'm still upright and drawing air. Alright guys, there's my explanation. I'm done. Whoop.